A powerful judge, revered by the entire nation, had concealed grave crimes for decades. But when one woman dared to stand up, the justice system was shaken to its core. Millions of lives were threatened, and a storm of battles began. Can justice prevail over corruption and deceit at the highest levels of power? The harsh glow of office lights flickered in the silence of the night, casting long shadows on the walls. The phone's shrill ring cut through the stillness, a stark interruption to the otherwise heavy quiet of Jasmine Crockett's private office. She sat at her desk, fingers gripping a pen, but her eyes were lost in the sprawling cityscape outside the window. The skyscrapers reflected the dim lights of the streets below, but to Jasmine, everything seemed distant, fading away in her thoughts. She had just finished an exhausting day in court, each investigation dragging her deeper into the tangled web of the justice system, where every step felt like it took her further into the dark. The hum of the city outside seemed to blend with her thoughts, a constant reminder of the life she had chosen, the life of seeking justice, even when it meant facing the uncomfortable truths that others preferred to ignore. Click. The phone rang again, breaking her trance. She didn't hesitate. Without glancing at the caller ID, she answered. The voice that came through was familiar, yet this time, something in the tone set her on edge. It wasn't the usual casual exchange. This was different. Jasmine, there's something you need to know. Something big. You need to hear this right now. It was Miles, her trusted informant, someone who had provided her with crucial information over the years. But this time, his voice was tinged with an urgency she had never heard before. It was a tone she knew well, the kind that came right before everything changed. Listen carefully. You can't let anyone know about this. Judge James Boasberg. He's hiding something dangerous. A decision he made. It could ruin everything. I don't have time to explain all the details, but there's a case he deliberately manipulated, a case he changed to protect people with political power, people who could destroy lives if this gets out. Miles's words were fast, almost as if he feared someone was listening in. Jasmine's heart skipped a beat. Boasberg. The name reverberated in her mind, a federal judge known for his integrity, praised for his unbiased rulings. He was a figure who seemed untouchable. How could a man so revered, so untouchable, be hiding something so dark? She leaned forward in her chair, a sense of dread beginning to creep in. Are you talking about the Trendy case? She asked, her voice dropping. Her mind raced back to the controversial decision Boasberg had made just a few weeks ago. The decision involved halting the deportation of 5 individuals linked to the notorious Trendy cartel, despite overwhelming evidence of their ties to terrorist organizations. Boasberg had ruled to protect them, citing legal ambiguities. It was a decision that had caused outrage across the nation, but what if there was more to it than anyone realized? Miles's voice crackled over the line, strained with urgency. Yes, that's the one. Boasberg changed his ruling just before the final judgment was made. There's no legal explanation for it, no reason why he would have reversed the decision, not without someone pulling strings behind the scenes. The strange thing is, after his decision, the political ties, the people he's connected to, well, they all benefited. That's where it gets ugly, Jasmine. A chill ran down her spine as the weight of his words settled in. Jasmine had been in the game long enough to know that nothing was ever as simple as it seemed. But this was bigger than anything she had ever encountered. A judge, a man who had made a career out of being beyond reproach, now looked like a pawn in a much darker game. She took a slow breath, trying to steady herself. I need evidence. Everything you're telling me right now is just speculation. If I'm going to dig into this, I need hard proof. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then Miles spoke, his voice thick with fear. You need to find the deleted documents, the hidden emails, the encrypted conversations. I can't tell you where to look, but if you want to expose this, if you want to bring Boasberg down, you have to go back through the cases he's handled recently. You have to look at the ones that didn't make sense. Something's off, Jasmine. I can feel it. It's right there in the details, but it's buried deep. Jasmine's jaw clenched. The tension in her chest grew unbearable. This wasn't just a normal investigation anymore. The stakes had been raised. What Miles was suggesting could cost them both everything. But if what he said was true, if Boasberg had been manipulating the system for years, then it wasn't just a matter of exposing a single bad apple. It was about taking down an entire corrupt system. She stood up from her desk, her pulse quickening. I'll need to know everything, Miles. I won't rest until I have the truth. But you're going to have to give me more than just vague hints. Where do I start? Miles's voice came back, filled with a mixture of desperation and resolve. Start with the trendy Ragwa case and work your way backward. Look for the pattern in his decisions, his alliances. The deeper you dig, the more you'll see. But be careful. They're watching, Jasmine. The more you uncover, the more dangerous it gets. Click. The line went dead. Jasmine stood there, staring at the phone in her hand, her mind racing. She could feel the weight of what lay ahead pressing down on her, suffocating. This wasn't just about finding the truth anymore. This was about taking on the very heart of the system that had been built on lies and deceit. She took a deep breath, her resolve hardening. She wasn't going to let this go. Not now. Not when she was so close. Jasmine knew that by stepping into this battle, she was walking a dangerous path, one that could destroy everything she had worked for. But at the same time, she knew she had no choice. The truth was out there, buried beneath the lies, and it was up to her to uncover it. I'm going to expose everything, she whispered to herself, her voice filled with a quiet fury. No matter the cost, no matter who I have to go through, I won't let the truth be buried. The battle had just begun, and Jasmine Crockett was ready to face it head-on. An hour had passed since the call with Miles, but Jasmine Crockett still couldn't shake the chaotic thoughts swirling in her mind. She sat motionless in her office, surrounded by the same files she reviewed day after day, the same cases she had grown accustomed to. But now, they all seemed insignificant. The truth about Judge Boasberg had shifted everything. A wave of tension rose within her, not because of what had happened, but because she knew she was standing at a crossroads. What would happen if she decided to act? What if Boasberg was truly part of a criminal power network? And more importantly, if she chose to turn everything upside down, what would she face? Would the system protect people like him, or would it tear apart in the face of the truth? Jasmine gazed out the window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance under the dark night sky. The towering buildings seemed to be watching her, asking her a question she wasn't ready to answer. She couldn't back down. She couldn't let this injustice continue unchecked. Her fists clenched, eyes burning with resolve. I won't let this truth be buried. It was just one decision, but it was a decision that could change everything. Jasmine Crockett had decided. She wouldn't stand on the sidelines any longer. She would act. Rising from her chair, she walked over to her desk and opened a drawer. Inside, she pulled out an old notebook, one that held all the information related to the cases she had investigated. She flipped through the pages, jotting down the crucial details. Jasmine knew that every piece of evidence needed to be collected carefully. Each puzzle piece had to fit together. Where do I start? She asked herself, her mind racing. Then it hit her. There was a recent case Boasberg had ruled on, the trendy Ragwa case. Boasberg's decision had sparked controversy across the nation, but for some reason, it hadn't attracted the attention it deserved. She needed more proof of the irregularities in this case. Her anticipation grew as she decided to call Clara, an administrative assistant from the courthouse who had worked with her on a previous case. Clara had close ties to the judges and could provide information on closed-door meetings and discussions Jasmine couldn't easily access. Jasmine didn't trust anyone else, but she knew she had to take the risk. She dialed the number. The phone rang 3 times before Clara's voice came through, low and anxious. Jasmine? Why are you calling me now? Clara, I need your help, Jasmine replied, her voice calm but firm. There's some information about Judge Boasberg that I think you can help me with. The conversation lasted for a few minutes, but Jasmine could feel the tension in Clara's words. The young woman had lived in fear for so long, and she knew that defying Boasberg could lead to consequences beyond what she could imagine. I can't do this, Jasmine. You know he's a federal judge. Who would dare go against him? Clara, if you don't help me, no one will. I need the documents from the trendy Ragwa case. Everything has to come from official sources, and I need you to provide clear evidence to expose the truth. There was silence on the other end of the line as Clara seemed to weigh her options. After a moment, she spoke softly but with determination. I'll help you, Jasmine. But you have to promise me you won't let this fall apart. Everything has to stay confidential. No one can know. Thank you, Clara, Jasmine whispered, relief flooding her, though the tension still lingered. She hung up the phone, a sense of fleeting relief washing over her, but the anticipation remained. In order to get Clara's help, she would need to protect her from the hidden dangers of their actions. Things were beginning to fall into place, but the road ahead was fraught with challenges. Jasmine knew there was no turning back now. She had to keep going. Everything could change in an instant, and she couldn't allow fear to stop her. I won't back down, she silently vowed. If I do nothing, this injustice will remain forever. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door, jarring her out of her thoughts. She jumped to her feet and quickly opened it. Standing before her was a man with a serious expression. He handed her a sealed envelope. "This is the document you need. But be careful, Jasmine. Don't let anyone know you're investigating." Jasmine took the envelope, her hands trembling with the weight of what she held. She realized then that the fight had officially begun. "I will do everything to make sure the truth is known," she thought, watching the man leave, knowing that this was just the beginning of a battle that would push her to her limits. The morning light filtered through the office windows, casting long streaks across the worn wooden desk as though they were scars that hadn't healed in Jasmine Crockett's mind. She sat there, her head spinning with thoughts of what Miles had said the night before and the decision she had just made. She stood at a crucial crossroads in her career, and every step she took could lead to everything collapsing. But she couldn't back down. The truth about Judge Boasberg was a massive crack in the judicial system she had once trusted. If she ignored it, no one might ever know the truth. And if she continued, she wouldn't just face the powerful forces behind him, but the very system she had been a part of. Jasmine took a deep breath, trying to clear her mind. She knew this investigation would not be easy. Everything could go awry. But she had to press forward. First, she decided to reach out to people in the legal field whom she trusted, those who had worked under Boasberg or had knowledge of his decisions. She started with David, a former court clerk who had left the industry for personal reasons. David was a reserved person, and the last time she had contacted him was months ago, when he had suddenly quit his job after having some disagreements with Boasberg. Jasmine knew if anyone could provide valuable information, it was David. She powered up her phone and dialed David's number. The phone rang, but unlike before, he didn't answer immediately. The tension built as the phone rang again. She sighed, and finally, he picked up. "Jasmine, why are you calling me?" David's voice sounded strange, almost as if he was worried about something. "David, I need your help. I'm investigating Judge Boasberg. I suspect there are some questionable decisions in his recent cases. Do you know anything about those decisions?" He was silent for a moment, as though he were carefully considering his words before responding. His voice dropped to a near whisper, as though speaking through a crack in a door. "Jasmine, you need to be careful. Boasberg is not someone to mess with. What you're doing, it could be dangerous for you and for me. But if you really want to know the truth..." The vague feeling of unease inside Jasmine deepened, but she wouldn't allow herself to retreat. She pressed on. "David, I don't have time to be afraid. What will he hide if I do nothing? Do you want to help me or not?" After a long pause, David sighed, and finally, he relented, revealing a few details. "You need to start with the decisions Boasberg has handled recently. You can't trust what he puts on paper. One of the cases he handled involved the Trendy Ragua cartel. I saw some documents that had been erased, answers that were vague and unclear. Criticism against him was swept under the rug, and that's just strange." David's words hung in the air like a warning. There was something lurking behind the cases Boasberg had been involved with. Jasmine scribbled down every word, her tension growing. But as she looked at the information she had, everything still felt hazy. There were only traces, no solid proof to confirm her suspicions. She couldn't hold her ground without more concrete evidence. Jasmine decided she had to keep digging, even though she knew she was walking into a labyrinth where every step could lead to danger. She started to review public records of the cases Boasberg had handled, searching for any overlooked traces. She opened her computer and accessed the court's online records, scrolling through Boasberg's rulings in recent months. Some of the decisions seemed ordinary, but the deeper she read, the more she felt that something was off. Boasberg hadn't been cautious in his rulings, making ambiguous decisions without clear reasoning or even changing his mind at the last minute without justifiable cause. These things couldn't just be simple oversights. Something bigger was happening. One ruling she found, about halting the deportation of several individuals linked to Trendy Ragua, particularly caught her attention. A decision had been made, but when she double-checked, the official court records were missing Boasberg's signature. This contradicted the normal procedure for handling major cases. This was enough to raise Jasmine's suspicion further about the legality of the ruling. Jasmine realized she had only scratched the surface of a much larger iceberg. Everything was still unclear, but her determination to uncover the truth was growing stronger. The first traces had appeared, but did she have enough evidence to bring the truth to light? She couldn't stop now, even though the danger was closing in on her. A wave of nervous anticipation mingled with fear as Jasmine Crockett sat before her computer screen in the dimly lit office. The rhythmic tapping of the keyboard echoed in her ears, Each keystroke felt like the pulse of her own racing heart. She knew she was moving closer to a truth she couldn't unsee, a truth that might change everything. After her conversation with David the previous night, she had decided to delve deeper into the public documents to uncover the traces of Judge Boasberg. It was a dangerous pursuit. She knew that if she wasn't careful, everything could be buried in the shadows. She opened a folder of documents she had copied from the federal court database. Boasberg's rulings on sensitive cases related to the trendy Ragwa cartel and suspects connected to terrorist organizations. Skimming through a series of decisions and reports, Jasmine felt a strange unease creeping over her, though nothing stood out as particularly abnormal at first. Then she stopped, her gaze fixed on a file titled Trendy Ragwa Draft Decision. A chill ran down her spine as she clicked to open it. According to the records, this file should have contained a formal ruling by Boasberg regarding the suspension of deportation for a group of individuals suspected of ties to the cartel. But as she opened the file, the first thing that struck her was there was no signature from Boasberg. The court system required all rulings to be signed with a clear timestamp. Yet this file contained only a blank draft filled with nothing but sparse notes. Jasmine's lips pressed into a thin line, the unease in her growing stronger. Cases like this didn't allow for such a loose decision-making process. But what alarmed her even more was the note at the bottom of the file, marked in red, "No signature needed. Judge's decision is for reference only, awaiting approval from higher authority." Those words sent a wave of dizziness through her. Why would a decision be handled like this? And why would a judge allow a serious case to be pending approval from above? Was this a sign of manipulation? Was there someone else behind Boasberg pulling the strings? Jasmine couldn't believe her eyes. She continued to review other documents related to cases Boasberg had handled. Another decision involving an organization linked to extremist groups had been completely erased. Not only were the documents deleted, but there were encrypted conversations that could not be decrypted. Emails from court staff had vanished as if every trace had been carefully wiped clean. A sense of shock welled up inside her, and her heart began to pound harder. It felt as if she were standing at the edge of a cliff, one wrong move away from falling into an abyss. But she also knew that this was the moment she had to act. What's going on here? She wondered aloud. These decisions couldn't just be mistakes. Boasberg had intentionally altered rulings without leaving a trace, and vital documents had been erased. This wasn't just an oversight. It was a calculated, deliberate action. However, what she had uncovered still wasn't enough to prove that Boasberg had done something wrong. At this point, all she had were faint traces, strange rulings that couldn't be explained. She needed more concrete evidence, something more solid. Everything still felt too vague. But one thing was certain, Jasmine couldn't stop now. She stood up, leaving her desk, and walked over to the window, gazing out at the city below. The quiet of the late night enveloped her, but her heart raced with thoughts of what lay ahead. These first clues were just the beginning of an investigation from which there could be no turning back. She knew that if she did nothing, this truth would remain buried in the dark forever. "I won't stop." Jasmine Crockett took a deep breath, turned back to her desk, and began drafting an urgent email to trusted colleagues, asking them for help in gathering more information, expanding the investigation into Boasberg. She couldn't do this alone. She needed people who could help her sift through the traces, analyze the remaining data, and verify every shred of evidence. The weight of tension still pressed heavily on her, but Jasmine felt like she was stepping into a journey with no way to turn back. Boasberg might be a powerful judge, but the truth, no matter how painful, was always worth seeking. And Jasmine Crockett would be the one to uncover it. Jasmine Crockett had been in the office all night, unable to tear her eyes away from the computer screen. The night had swallowed the city outside, leaving only the dim glow of her office lights flickering like the sole beacon in the dark. The documents she had found were filled with vague truths, but something still didn't sit right. She couldn't stop the feeling of unease and curiosity that surrounded her, urging her to keep going. She reopened the documents she had copied from the federal court database, and this time, her determination to find concrete proof of Boasberg's misconduct made her unable to stop reading, even though her heart was racing faster than ever. As she continued to review the cases Boasberg had handled, she found more details that made her pause. One ruling in particular, about a major shipping company tied to a group with close political connections, shocked Jasmine. At first, she hadn't recognized the links, But the deeper she dug into the details, the clearer the political ties behind the case became. Boasberg had made a controversial decision, one that could alter the course of an entire investigation, but there was no official reason documented in the files. This left Jasmine feeling anxious and confused. Most concerning was Boasberg's choice to delay the trial of a case related to an organization connected to high-ranking government officials. The judge's note in the file read, "Request for trial delay due to government requests needing further consideration." There was no public announcement, only a private negotiation with no official documentation. This wasn't just vague, it was a blatant act of deceit. Jasmine could feel the connections becoming clearer. Every decision Boasberg had made no longer seemed like a simple mistake or oversight. This was a calculated strategy, a deliberate effort to protect those with political power with whom he had ties. She began to suspect that this judge wasn't merely a court official. He might be part of a larger network, a system protecting the powerful from facing the consequences of their actions. So, Boasberg isn't just a judge, Jasmine thought to herself, her mind racing. He's guarding a corrupt system. The thought sent a chill down her spine. She stood up from her desk and walked over to the window, staring at the city below, now silent under the dim streetlights. The feeling of fear grew inside her. What she was facing wasn't just an investigation into a judge. It could be a battle against a global power system. As she thought over her next steps, a new email notification popped up in her inbox. It was from Clara, the contact she had reached out to earlier, and she had sent over more documents. Jasmine quickly opened the email. She knew Clara had to be extremely careful in sending these files, for if she were caught, her life could change forever. "Jasmine, I've sent over the important documents. Check them immediately. What you find could help clarify things. But I need to remind you again, be careful. Things have gone too far." Jasmine didn't respond immediately. She knew this was a double-edged sword. She opened the attachments Clara had sent, and this time, she found a copy of a secret meeting between Boasberg and several high-ranking government officials. The contents of the meeting were not what the public knew. It was filled with covert instructions being passed. One of the orders was to delay rulings in cases involving terrorist organizations where some defendants were protected due to their connections within the government. Jasmine's vague suspicions slowly solidified into certainty. She stared at the copies of the documents, her heart pounding harder as each word came into focus. This was the proof she had been looking for. But another question loomed in her mind. If Boasberg's decisions were linked to these cases and he was protecting the powerful, how many other cases had he manipulated? And if she kept going, what consequences would she face? Jasmine felt an invisible weight pressing down on her. She knew she was facing a massive force, and if she wasn't careful, she could be sucked into this whirlwind. But even as fear crept in, she couldn't stop. She knew this was the time to act, and with every passing minute, the truth was becoming clearer. She stood up, grabbed a map, and began to sketch out a detailed plan for the next steps. "I will see this through," she told herself. "If no one else dares face the truth, I will." The flickering light from the desk lamp cast long, eerie shadows across the dark office. Jasmine Crockett sat silently at her desk, her gaze fixed firmly on the documents she had gathered. The pieces of evidence were still vague, the suspicious details surrounding Judge Boasberg swirling around her like a storm she couldn't escape. Yet the truth was still elusive. She knew she needed more evidence, that she had to dig deeper despite the threats she was now facing. The sudden ring of the phone jolted her from her thoughts. Looking at the screen, she saw an unfamiliar number. A wave of unease washed over her. With a lingering sense of doubt, she pressed the answer button. "Jasmine Crockett?" The voice on the other end was cold, devoid of any emotion. It was a voice she didn't recognize, but it carried an undeniable authority. "Who is this?" Jasmine asked, her voice steady, but the tension in her chest rising. She didn't want to reveal her fear, but something about this call felt far from coincidental. "It doesn't matter who's calling. What matters is this. If you continue digging into this case, the consequences will be beyond anything you can imagine." The voice remained chilling, carrying an edge of menace, and Jasmine felt as though an invisible weight was settling over her life. Jasmine clenched her fist, the sense of unease growing stronger. She knew she had crossed a line, and now the threats weren't just part of the investigation. They were warnings from those pulling the strings behind the scenes, people who could easily make her life crumble. But instead of fear, this warning made her more resolute. "I'm not afraid of threats like this. If someone is trying to stop me, then they've made a mistake," she replied, her voice firm, though a sense of unease still gripped her heart. A long silence followed before the cold voice came through again. "Be careful, Jasmine. The truth may not be what you want to find. Click. The line went dead. Jasmine sat motionless, a cold shiver running down her spine. She dropped the phone from her hand, her eyes glued to the computer screen. Everything was becoming clearer, but also more complicated. The forces behind Boasberg weren't easy to defeat. But instead of fear, Jasmine felt a renewed strength surging within her. She knew this was a battle she couldn't walk away from. Win or lose, she had to continue. Jasmine Crockett wasn't the type to give up once she was committed to uncovering the truth. This threat wouldn't stop her. She continued to open more files, searching for crucial traces. The night stretched on with only her and the endless documents in front of her. But this time, something had changed inside her. She wasn't just a lawyer seeking justice anymore. Jasmine had become a warrior not only facing a judge, but a corrupt power system. As she started to review another case Boasberg had handled recently, her phone vibrated again. This time, it wasn't an unknown number, but a message from Clara. Jasmine quickly opened the message, her heart full of hope. Clara wrote, "I just got some important documents, but don't use them alone. Be careful. They are watching us." A cold wave passed through Jasmine's body. She couldn't believe she was being watched, but she knew that if anyone was trying to stop her, there was only one way forward. She had to expose the truth. Boasberg couldn't continue acting without facing consequences, and she was the one who would bring him to light. Jasmine grabbed her phone and opened the files Clara had sent. What she saw made her heart race with more tension. They were encrypted calls, documents that seemed deliberately hidden with a clear purpose. Every trace pointed to Boasberg, but one thing was still missing. The final piece of evidence to prove that he had intentionally protected those in power. But instead of feeling exhausted, Jasmine felt a new sense of strength rise within her. "I won't stop. No matter what threats or obstacles they throw at me, I will not back down." With determination in her eyes, she began expanding her investigation, reaching out not just for more documents, but for people who might know something. Jasmine Crockett knew she wasn't just fighting for justice. She was fighting against a justice system that was being torn apart from within. The door to Jasmine Crockett's office clicked shut behind her, and once again, she found herself drawn into a quiet solitude. The only light in the room came from the dim desk lamp, casting faint shadows over the piles of documents she had accumulated over the past few days. Each file, each piece of evidence, was a fragment of a larger story she couldn't turn away from. But at the same time, they were dangerous shards that could crush her career. Jasmine sank into her chair, her hands pressed to her forehead, exhaustion weighing heavily on her mind. She closed her eyes, and the thoughts swirled inside her head. Boasberg, this powerful judge, had entered her life like a storm, sweeping away everything she once believed in. But beneath the threat he posed, she started to wonder, did she have the courage to stand up to him and the dark forces standing behind him? Despite uncovering numerous suspicious elements in Boasberg's rulings, Jasmine still felt lost, as though she was walking down a foggy path with no clear destination. She couldn't rely solely on the ambiguous information she had collected. She needed solid evidence. But more than that, she had to confront herself. "Can I do this?" she wondered, the voice in her head echoing relentlessly. "If I do this, everything will change forever. Can I really fight a powerful judge and the people behind him without losing everything?" A soft knock at the door broke her thoughts. She turned around to see Clara standing there, Clara who had helped her by providing crucial documents. But today, Clara's face looked different, tired, strained. She walked in, closed the door behind her gently, and sat down across from Jasmine. "Is something wrong, Clara?" Jasmine asked, trying to keep her voice calm. Clara was silent for a moment, then looked directly into Jasmine's eyes. She didn't say anything at first, but handed Jasmine an envelope full of documents. Avoiding eye contact, Jasmine took the envelope and opened it. What she saw made her heart tighten. Inside was a copy of another ruling Boasberg had handled, and this time, it wasn't just a ruling. It was a series of back-and-forth calls between him and high-ranking government officials, along with documents related to secret negotiations. These calls were never made public, and the documents contained information that anyone in the legal field would immediately recognize as highly irregular. Jasmine felt the tension rise, but she had to stay calm. Why were these calls hidden? Why weren't these important decisions made public as they should be? Could Boasberg's rulings be the result of shady political dealings he had been involved in? A wave of fear washed over her, but quickly a different feeling, a sense of determination, began to take its place. If I don't act now, will the truth ever come to light? Jasmine asked herself. She knew she couldn't stop now. These traces, though vague, were powerful enough to bring everything into the light. Boasberg wasn't just any judge, and if she didn't stand up right now, an entire system would continue to be manipulated. Clara looked at her, worry evident in her eyes. Jasmine, I understand you want to do this, but be careful. You can't know what the consequences will be when you go up against someone like Boasberg. I can't just stand by. I can't ignore this injustice any longer, Jasmine replied, her voice resolute. She stood up, stepping away from her chair, feeling that she had reached a point of no return. The light in the small room dimmed further, but the determination inside Jasmine burned brighter than ever. Boasberg must be held accountable. If I don't do this, who will? She turned back to look at Clara, and this time, there was no hint of doubt in her eyes. I'm going forward with this, no matter what the cost. Clara looked at her, saying nothing but giving a small nod. She knew the time had come to face the truth, and if Jasmine didn't take the lead, no one else would. But Clara also understood that the path ahead would not be easy. It would be a battle not just with Boasberg, but with a powerful system of corruption. Jasmine turned back to her desk, opened her computer, and began drafting a detailed plan for the next steps. She would not sit idly by, waiting for information to come to her. Jasmine Crockett would take the initiative. She would find every way possible to bring the truth to light, no matter the dangers that lay in wait. Jasmine Crockett sat silently in her office, the faint glow from the desk lamp illuminating the piles of documents she had gathered over the past days. But today, everything felt different. A deep, dark truth that she couldn't ignore was beginning to emerge. The pieces she had found in the cases, the rulings from Boasberg, no longer seemed like mere legal traces. They were a strategy, a plot protected by forces greater than she had imagined. Those she had once thought were allies in the fight for justice were now standing with Boasberg, shielding him from exposure. Her eyes narrowed as she scrolled through an email she had just discovered in a forgotten data folder. This email, sent by a high-ranking government official, was closely linked to Boasberg. The contents weren't just a simple approval of his decisions. They were a clear defense of Boasberg's actions. Jasmine read and reread every word, a rising sense of fury swelling inside her. These people weren't just protecting a judge, they were shielding a system that had long been familiar with injustice. There's something being hidden, and I need to expose it, Jasmine muttered to herself as she continued to open other documents. One name in the email not only appeared as a protector of Boasberg, but also as a top official in the Department of Justice, someone she had never suspected before. A secret phone call between this official and Boasberg was revealed in a note she discovered near the end of the email. They had discussed ways to block investigations, ways to protect Boasberg from any scrutiny. Jasmine's outrage grew exponentially. What she was uncovering was a widespread system of protection for injustice, with allies of Boasberg not just as accomplices, but as powerful figures who were concealing every wrong in order to maintain their power. She stood up, feeling as though there was no escape. Every step she took was being watched, and now she realized that she wasn't just fighting against Boasberg anymore. She was fighting a network, a protective web of powerful figures in society. They would never let her break the system easily. The fatigue weighed heavily on her, as if everything was conspiring against her. But the fury, the hunger for justice, only made her more determined. If I don't do something, these people will continue to manipulate the system. Jasmine spoke to herself, her eyes burning with resolve. She kept searching for more information, not letting any trace slip away. But the more she found, the more complicated everything became. The encrypted messages, the hidden emails, the erased conversations, everything piled up, creating an impenetrable wall. She realized that she couldn't break through this wall alone, and if she didn't have help from others, there was no way she could face these forces on her own. There was only one person she knew could help her, someone in the legal field, someone she trusted, Marcus, an old colleague who had worked with her on a major case in the past. He was the only one who could help her decrypt the codes and retrieve important documents from the system without being detected. But contacting him in this situation would be dangerous. She didn't know if he would be willing to help, knowing that doing so might put him in harm's way as well. Jasmine picked up the phone, her hands trembling as she dialed Marcus' number. Each second felt like a century. She wondered if he would grasp the seriousness of the situation. When the phone rang, she felt as though she was standing at a crossroads with no way back. Jasmine, Marcus's voice came through, full of concern. What's going on? Marcus, I need your help. I'm investigating a federal judge, and I can't do this alone. You're the only one who can help me decode important documents." There was a long pause before Marcus answered. He took a deep breath, as if weighing something important. "Are you sure about this? What you're doing isn't simple, Jasmine. If we get caught—" "I know, Marcus. But if we don't do something, everything will stay hidden forever. We can't let this injustice continue." Finally, after a long silence, he sighed and replied, "All right, I'll help you. But you have to promise me you'll be careful." "I promise." The conversation ended, but Jasmine knew she had just opened a dangerous door. The forces behind Boasberg wouldn't let her easily access this truth. But Jasmine Crockett had no way out, and there was no turning back now. She had come too far. "They can't stop me," she whispered to herself, her grip tightening, more determined than ever. That day, Jasmine Crockett felt the air around her change. She stood amidst the files, no longer as a solitary figure, but as a warrior on the battlefield. With each passing day, the tension grew higher, but what drove her to keep going wasn't just the injustice she was fighting against. It was herself. Jasmine had already plunged too deep into this battle. There was no turning back, and no matter how everything around her shifted, she couldn't abandon the fight. She had just received an email from Marcus, the one who had helped her gather more critical documents. In the email, Marcus warned her of the increasingly evident danger she was facing. "Jasmine, I've decrypted some documents, but you need to be careful. I've heard that people are looking for anyone involved in this investigation. You're getting too close. Don't let things get out of hand." Jasmine didn't respond immediately. She stood up from her desk, her eyes still fixed on the files. The sense of tension still clung to her, but at the same time, she felt a stronger sense of determination rising within her. She had come too far, and she couldn't stop just because of a few warnings. But just as she was about to dive back into her work, there was a knock on the door, pulling her out of her thoughts. The door opened, and standing before her was David, a colleague she had enlisted for help in past cases. Though he wasn't directly involved in this investigation, his presence made Jasmine uneasy. He looked at her, his expression serious. "Jasmine, I hear you're going too far with this. What you're doing could ruin your career." Jasmine wasn't surprised by his words, but her calmness was being tested. David had always been the cautious one, the one who would criticize her if he felt her actions were misplaced. "David, I know what I'm doing, but I can't stand by when the truth is being hidden." Boasberg's decisions aren't just legal errors. They are part of a strategy to protect those in power. David shook his head as if he couldn't understand the determination in her eyes. "Don't you see? Everyone in the field is watching you. They won't just let you get away with this, Jasmine. And I'm not sure you can do this alone." Jasmine stood straighter, locking eyes with David. Her gaze was fiery, filled with unwavering resolve. "I'm not doing this alone. I have people supporting me, people who believe in justice. And no matter what forces I have to face, I will not quit." David didn't say anything else. He turned to leave, his eyes full of concern. Jasmine could feel his uncertainty, but she couldn't let it shake her. She had gone too far to turn back now. People might warn her, might try to stop her, but she knew she couldn't give up on this fight. She continued her work, and the deeper she delved into the documents, the clearer it became that this battle wasn't just about a judge. It was a fight against a system that had long concealed the truth. Every step she took, every piece of information, every bit of evidence she uncovered was another crack in the wall of protection that had been built around Boasberg. One day, as she continued reviewing the files, Jasmine received a call. This time, it wasn't from Marcus or David, but from an unknown number. She answered cautiously, her heart tightening. "Jasmine? It seems you still don't understand what's going on." The cold, detached voice sent a familiar chill down her spine. It was the voice of the person who had warned her before, but this time, there was something more in the tone, a clear sense of urgency. "I warned you, Jasmine. They're watching you. Don't go too far, or no one will be able to help you." The words hit Jasmine like a punch to the gut, but she didn't flinch. Instead, her resolve only grew stronger. "I'm going to keep going. If I don't act, no one will. I'm ready to face it all." She hung up the phone, setting it down on the desk. Everything seemed to be closing in on her. Every decision, every move was a challenge she couldn't avoid. But she knew that if she didn't act now, she would lose the only chance to expose the truth. She stood up, ran a hand over her face, and took a deep breath. She hadn't turned back. Jasmine Crockett would see this through, no matter the cost. The pale light of early morning quietly seeped through the office window, casting a cold, lonely hue over the room. Jasmine Crockett sat at her desk, holding a now cold cup of coffee, her eyes fixed on the files about Boasberg she had gathered over the past few days. Her breathing was heavy, as if she were facing an insurmountable mountain. Fatigue intertwined with a growing sense of unease in her chest, but Jasmine knew she couldn't stop. She had gone too far to turn back now. The phone on her desk rang abruptly, breaking the heavy silence in the room. She hesitated for a moment before picking it up. "Jasmine, we have a big problem." Marcus's voice came through, sounding frantic, his breath shallow as though he had been racing against time. "What's going on?" Jasmine asked, a growing sense of worry rising in her chest. "It's Clara," Marcus responded, his voice tightening with stress. She's gone. She's dead." Jasmine felt as if she had been struck by lightning. She sat frozen, her grip tightening around the phone until her knuckles turned white. Clara's death, someone she trusted, someone who had been a crucial source of information, felt like the entire world was crumbling around her. "What? How did she die?" Jasmine asked, her voice faltering, unable to comprehend the words she had just heard. "She was murdered." "A car accident?" "No, Jasmine. This wasn't an accident. She was stabbed in an attack." Jasmine's entire body seemed to freeze, her heart pounding in her chest. Clara, the colleague who had helped her with this investigation, was now gone. Her death wasn't just the loss of a friend. It was a stark, brutal warning from the dark forces Jasmine was up against. She didn't want to believe it, but deep down, she knew this was the inevitable consequence of this fight. Clara hadn't just been a source of information. She had become a target because she knew too much. Just like so many others, she had been erased with ruthless finality. Jasmine didn't speak, only hearing Marcus' heavy breathing on the other end. She knew he was worried about her, but his concern couldn't undo what had happened. Clara was dead, and Jasmine was the next name on that list if she didn't walk away from this war. Everything she had faced in the past days, all the hidden dangers and risks yet to be revealed, had only just begun. Jasmine felt a sharp pain in her chest, but along with it, there was another feeling, a feeling she couldn't deny. She couldn't stop now. "I can't quit, Marcus." Jasmine's voice was firm, without a hint of weakness. Her words felt like a vow. "Clara sacrificed herself. I will keep investigating. I will do everything to expose the truth. I can't let her death be in vain." On the other end, Marcus couldn't respond, only sighing deeply. The grief and pain in his voice were understandable, but Jasmine had made her decision. She wouldn't give up, even if it meant facing death itself. She stood up, walking out of the office without saying a word to anyone. Everything around her seemed to swirl, but inside, her resolve only grew stronger. Clara was dead, but her fight had only just begun. Night had fallen, and Jasmine Crockett sat in her office, the only light coming from her desk lamp, casting long shadows over the papers scattered across her desk. Though the day had been filled with countless calls, emails, and documents to review, her mind couldn't shake the haunting thought of Clara's death. The loss was not only heartbreaking, but it also served as an undeniable warning, a reminder that this fight was not just about hidden agendas, but also about the very real danger she had yet to fully comprehend. She sighed, weary, but inside, a determination burned stronger than ever. Clara's death had ignited a fire in her, and Jasmine knew she could not let her sacrifice be in vain. But with that resolve came a deeper sense of isolation. The people around her didn't understand, and perhaps she couldn't explain it to them. The phone rang, breaking the silence. This time, she wasn't surprised, but as she picked up the receiver, it wasn't Marcus nor anyone in her circle. The voice on the other end was calm yet powerful, sending a shiver down her spine. "Jasmine, I need you to listen to me for a minute." The voice was Richard Hayes, a political figure she had met in several unofficial meetings. He had a significant influence in political circles but always kept a safe distance in any conflict. Now, Jasmine knew he wouldn't contact her unless things had escalated beyond danger. "Richard?" Jasmine asked cautiously. "What's going on?" Richard's voice was tense. "You've gone too far, Jasmine. I don't know what your intentions are, but I want you to understand that what you're doing could lead to consequences you can't even begin to imagine. You're not just up against Boasberg. You're up against forces you don't even know. If you continue, no one will be able to protect you." A cold chill ran down Jasmine's spine. A strange and unsettling feeling stirred inside her, but she quickly pushed it away, replacing it with a firm resolve in her voice. "Richard, I understand what you're saying, but I can't turn back. Clara's dead, and I can't let her sacrifice be meaningless. I have to continue this fight, no matter who I face." Richard paused, seemingly weighing her words. Then he spoke, his voice heavy with concern. Jasmine, I don't want to see you end up in a situation where no one can help you. The people you're dealing with aren't ordinary. They can operate in the shadows, leaving no trace. The more you investigate, the closer you get to things you don't want to know. Jasmine remained silent. His warnings didn't scare her, but they made her feel an overwhelming sense of loneliness. No one was on her side. She had entered a battle that no one else wanted to join. But in that solitude, her resolve remained unwavering. Richard, I'm not afraid of what I'm about to face. I can't stop now. It's the only thing I can do, she replied, her voice filled with unwavering determination, showing no signs of hesitation. Richard's voice grew sad, as if he already knew she wouldn't change her mind. All right, Jasmine, I just want you to know that what you're doing could cost you everything. Not just your career, but your life. I don't want to see that happen, but I can't help you anymore. The call ended, and Jasmine sat there in silence. Her mind was tangled with Richard's warnings, but all she could feel in that moment was the surge of determination swelling in her chest. Clara was dead, and she couldn't let those responsible for her death escape justice. She couldn't turn back. Jasmine stood, walking over to the window, gazing out at the silent city below. The city seemed quiet, but in her heart, every step she took was a continuous battle. The powerful forces might be silently watching her, but she wouldn't let them make her afraid. Jasmine Crockett had gone too deep into this fight to stop now. Every warning, every threatening call, only made her more resolute. She had no choice now. She had to continue. She returned to her desk, opened her computer, and resumed her work. This time, there was no hesitation, no fear. She would see this through, no matter what consequences awaited her. Jasmine Crockett no longer felt like she was in an ordinary investigation. With each passing day, she realized that this fight had surpassed the boundaries she once imagined. The secrets she had started to uncover were no longer just legal errors or ambiguous decisions from Boasberg. Everything was connected to a much larger conspiracy that she could never have predicted, a web of intertwined power involving people she couldn't easily confront. She sat at her desk, staring at her computer screen with a pile of documents still left to review. But what she had just discovered made her heart race with an indescribable feeling. Boasberg's decisions were not the result of external political influences. They had been premeditated, woven together by a powerful group, people who weren't just protecting the judge but the entire dark system behind him. Every ruling Boasberg made was part of a deliberate plan arranged by those behind the scenes. But as she searched for the truth, the evidence she found only grew more ambiguous. Each new document made the story more complicated. One email she discovered was from a high-ranking lawyer who had worked with Boasberg on a significant case. The language used was cryptic, as if there was an underlying message hidden between the lines. She kept analyzing, but the remaining clues weren't clear enough to act on. She felt like she was walking into a labyrinth with no way out, where everyone remained silent and every piece of information was deliberately concealed. Just then, her phone rang again. She glanced at the screen and saw Marcus's name. She picked up the phone immediately, but a sense of unease gripped her. The conversation with Richard still echoed in her mind, and she knew that every time Marcus contacted her, there was another issue she'd have to face. Jasmine, I've got some bad news. Marcus' voice was tense, unlike his usual calm demeanor. What's going on? Jasmine asked, her worry creeping in. I've just received information from an anonymous source. They say Boasberg isn't the only one in this game. There's a group behind him, and they're preparing to make their move. Jasmine felt like the ground beneath her had been swept away, a cold shiver running down her spine. A group behind him. These forces were not just protecting Boasberg. They were the ones controlling the rulings and decisions in the shadows. Marcus, what do we do now? Jasmine asked, her voice low, but deep inside. She felt like she was standing at the edge of a cliff with no way back. I don't know, Jasmine. We're up against forces that are too big. If you keep going, you could be in more danger than ever before. A wave of dread washed over Jasmine, but she couldn't turn back. She had come too far, and now she couldn't stop. I can't give up, Marcus. I have to keep going. If I don't, who will? The tension inside her didn't lessen. She realized she had gone too deep into this conspiracy, but because of that, she couldn't stop. With every passing minute, the truth became clearer, but it also became more ambiguous and dangerous. I'll keep going, Marcus. No matter who I have to face, I can't back down, Jasmine replied, her voice firm. She knew she was stepping into a battle with no way back, but the truth was something she had to uncover. The next steps she took would be irreversible. Jasmine Crockett had become the only person who could confront this injustice. But she knew this fight wasn't just about her against Boasberg. Behind him were the ones who created this deep web of power, and there was only one person who could unravel it all. And that person was her. But everything was becoming more obscure than ever. The conspiracies were no longer just about Boasberg's faulty decisions. They were secrets concealed behind every step, every decision she had uncovered. She couldn't rely on documents anymore, nor on the truths that had been buried for too long. Now she had to use everything she had to continue the fight. Jasmine Crockett wasn't just facing a judge. She was facing a system built in the shadows, and she wasn't going to let it stand any longer. Jasmine Crockett sat silently in her office, staring at the documents in front of her. Each sheet, each line held secrets she could not ignore. For a brief moment, she felt an overwhelming sense of solitude, as if she were standing at a crossroads with no way back. She had delved too deep into this investigation, and now there was no turning back. Everything was set. Her decision had been made. Jasmine knew that by choosing to publicly expose all of Boasberg's secrets, she wouldn't just be confronting a judge accused of corruption. She would be unraveling an entire manipulated judicial system. The forces that had protected Boasberg, the hidden powers that had shielded him for years, would not back down easily. But none of that mattered to Jasmine. She could not remain silent while injustice dominated every decision. While people like Boasberg still held positions of power, hiding the truth and protecting the politically powerful. I have to do this. No one else will, Jasmine whispered to herself, her gaze never leaving the scattered documents on her desk. She had already mapped out her plan. The press conference would take place tomorrow. This would be the moment she would officially reveal everything about Boasberg, their unjust rulings, the shady connections, the manipulation of the justice system. She would no longer remain in the shadows. She would step into the light. And no matter the consequences, she would not falter. Jasmine understood that this decision wouldn't only affect her. It would impact the entire judicial system. Exposing everything would lead to widespread change. Some people would be toppled, and wrongful decisions would be exposed. But it could also destroy her career. For Jasmine, there was no other choice. If she didn't do it, who would? Who would stand up against a system that had been corrupt for so many years? The night before the press conference, Jasmine stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her outfit. She stared into her own eyes, asking herself, would she have the courage to continue? The truth might destroy not just her, but those closest to her. But she couldn't go back. She couldn't give up. That wasn't who she was. She had made her decision, and nothing could change that. The next day, as Jasmine stepped toward the press conference room, all eyes turned toward her. Despite her thorough preparation, a sense of nervous tension gripped her. She knew that what she was about to say would not only be a confrontation between her and Boasberg, but a battle with the entire judicial system. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Jasmine Crockett. Today, I stand before you to expose the truths that have been hidden for far too long, she began, her voice strong and unwavering. The decisions made by Judge Boasberg in crucial cases are not mistakes or coincidences. They are deliberate actions designed to protect the powerful and manipulate justice. Everyone in the room listened intently, but Jasmine could feel that beyond the room, those protecting Boasberg were watching her every move. The threat from them was palpable, but she knew she couldn't turn back. She had decided to stand up for justice, and nothing could make her stop now. As she presented the evidence of Boasberg's shady rulings, the deleted emails, the secret calls, the opaque decisions, an overwhelming tension filled the room like a storm was about to break. She wasn't just confronting Boasberg anymore. She was up against the entire judicial system that was desperately trying to protect him. The people who had shielded Boasberg wouldn't easily let her tear down what they had built. As soon as Jasmine revealed the damning evidence, a fierce backlash erupted. Those protecting Boasberg immediately responded fiercely, criticizing her. Boasberg's lawyer spoke up, accusing her of having personal motives, claiming her accusations were baseless and part of a political game. But Jasmine didn't back down. Though a part of her felt the weight of their criticisms, her resolve only grew stronger. She faced their attacks without hesitation. You can criticize me all you want, but you can't change the truth. Justice must be protected, and if I don't stand up, who will? She retorted with fierce conviction. The negative reactions from Boasberg supporters did not make her waver. She could feel the tension, the fierce struggle between her and a system that protected the powerful. But inside, nothing could shake her determination. She knew that this wasn't just a fight for her. It was a fight for everyone who had been oppressed by this system. The press conference ended, and although she knew she had uncovered part of the truth, she realized this was just the beginning. Jasmine Crockett would not stop. The battle would continue, and she would be the one to win it. Jasmine Crockett stood before the door of the press conference room, the light from the projector illuminating her face. She knew this moment would change everything, and there was no turning back. Each step she took was filled with unwavering resolve. Today, she wasn't just confronting Boasberg. She was going to show the world the truth about his wrongdoings, the secrets that the hidden forces had tried so hard to conceal. The entire hall fell silent as Jasmine stepped up to the podium, holding a USB drive containing the crucial documents and encrypted conversations she had gathered from reliable sources. She no longer needed to read speeches or make any grand declarations. Jasmine only needed to present the evidence because the evidence would speak for itself. Today, I stand before you not to persuade, but to show you the truth, Jasmine began, her voice strong, unwavering. She began projecting the documents she had uncovered, the emails, the encrypted conversations, the secret directives between Boasberg and high-ranking government officials. Each image on the screen left the people in the room wide-eyed with disbelief. The evidence was irrefutable, and it made Jasmine's narrative even more compelling and trustworthy. These conversations are not just empty words. They are proof of manipulation, of the protection Boasberg has received from the system, she continued, pointing to the screen. Each word she spoke was a punch to the face of those defending Boasberg. The world outside began to take notice. Continuous calls from the press, major news channels, and powerful organizations started raising questions. Jasmine had never felt more powerful, and those behind Boasberg could feel it too. She had exposed the truth, not just about one judge, but about a system that had been hidden for far too long. The atmosphere in the press conference room grew tense. Excitement and disbelief painted on everyone's face. The people in the room couldn't believe what they were seeing. This was no ordinary story. It was the revelation of secrets, the unveiling of an injustice that couldn't be denied. As Jasmine concluded her presentation, the room was still heavy with the weight of the moment. The evidence she presented was not just cold facts. They were stories of injustice, of victims unseen in a legal system that had been manipulated. Those protecting Boasberg could no longer find excuses. They couldn't blame Jasmine anymore. The public began to take notice, and official investigations from the relevant authorities were launched. Boasberg could no longer shield himself with his power. Official charges were filed, and step by step, he faced his collapse. The questions Jasmine had raised didn't just shock the judicial system. They sparked a movement calling for reform in the legal system. When Boasberg first spoke to the public, his voice was trembling, no longer filled with the confidence he once had. I did nothing wrong. These pieces of evidence have been distorted. He attempted to defend himself, but no one believed his words anymore. Jasmine stood there, unwavering. As each day passed, she felt the liberation of justice. All the injustices she had witnessed were now being brought to light. She no longer feared retaliation. She had won, and Boasberg would pay for the wrongs he had committed. The day arrived when Boasberg had to face the official charges. Jasmine stood in the courtroom, staring at Boasberg from across the room. This moment was no longer about her. It was about justice. The entire judicial system stood before a great test, and the truth that Jasmine had uncovered was a powerful blow to a system that had long been accustomed to secrecy and unchecked power. As the charges were read aloud, Boasberg could no longer maintain the confidence he once had. He had reached the point where he had to face everything he had done. No longer could he shield himself with his power. Justice had been revealed. Judge Boasberg, you are facing serious charges for manipulating the justice system, for protecting those with power, and for concealing the truth. The judge's voice echoed in the silent courtroom. All eyes were on him. Jasmine didn't feel elation or victory. She only felt a sense of peace. She knew that this was the result of a long and arduous battle, but it was also the triumph of justice. When everything was over, Jasmine Crockett looked back at the journey she had undertaken. She realized that this struggle was not just about one judge. It was about fairness and change in an entire legal system. She had fought not just for one person, but for all those who had been overlooked, oppressed by this system. Justice is not just a victory in one case. It's a change in how we view and act, she told herself. She didn't need to celebrate, for she had done what she knew was right. Jasmine's story didn't end here. She continued her work, continuing the fight not for fame, but for change in a system she had helped expose. And deep inside, she knew that justice would always endure, no matter the trials it faced.